It is Thursday, March 27th, 2015. I'm at Laurelhurst Park, and I'm in probably one of the only shaded, covered spots left. And I'm going to be giving a geopolitical update in light of all the news taking place. I will remind the audience that we saw the largest geomagnetic storm of the solar cycle just last week. Now, even though it didn't cause any major power outages, regular viewers of this channel and my content know how long I've been talking about solar cycles and the links to cycles of war, battles beginning, and basically mankind being duped into war, along with other changes that we see on the planet and within society and within humanity that could be deemed positive or negative, depending on how you're looking at it. But without a doubt, solar flares boost what is taking place on Earth and within human society. And what we are seeing here in the geopolitical situation is an escalation of moves on the chessboard towards World War III. And this coming battle, this coming clash of titans, is a contrived, managed, controlled, orchestrated theater of war, which now is on steroids, all being done to destroy the economy and the military of the United States. The United States is openly going through countries in Europe, freaking out the entire world, engaging in threatening, blaming, you can even call it suicidal behavior, labeling Venezuela as a threat. Meanwhile, it appears that there's some sort of nuke deal that's just gone through that's going to allow Iran to build their weapon. Interesting thing about Iran, I've always felt they were a part of whatever's taking place with Ahmadinejad in the past, calling for a new world order. And for years I've reported on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, led by China and Russia, as this military counterbalance to NATO that's been building this entire time in the East. So as the United States does more self-destructive things, both economically and militarily, as well as engage in behavior that's basically threatening the entire world, much the world which they have already armed, you have an obvious situation and response, which was not difficult to see several years ago. That we would end up at a point where things would become super nationalistic, anti-American, and we would see this buildup of military moves on borders. And a lot of people have been looking at Iran for years as the trigger point. And we've been seeing things build and build and build. And here's what's going on right now. Chechnya has said that they're going to respond to the United States arming Ukraine by arming Mexico. And we're seeing an increase in Russian bombers flying near Western aerospace, either in Europe or the United States, and people are becoming numb to this, that this type of thing is taking place, and it's become so normalized. Actually, they flew over Switzerland recently with their transponders off. So, you know, people don't want to be freaked out, and they certainly don't want to be alarmed. A lot of people want their cake, and they want to eat it too. But the issue is all of this is building up, and this isn't being done for nothing. Fortunately, people are caught up in the theater of war with the he said, she said, and they're buying into the fallacy that this is genuinely a real struggle between the East and the West. And as we see these things take place on the ground, and there's many other headlines, check out amtvmedia.com and scroll through the headline section, and those are articles that I posted to the website. A lot of major stuff's taking place. Oh, also, the United States is putting a missile defense system in Poland, which they've been trying to get going for years. And there's a lot of stuff going back and forth, a lot of stuff that Russia's doing as well. I'm not for or against Russia. I'm certainly not for. And I can certainly understand the argument that some people have that Russia is doing what it's doing, that China's doing what it's doing, especially with the creation of their Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, in response to things that the United States is doing, the Federal Reserve has done, the IMF, the World Bank, so on and so forth. But everything the United States has been done and doing this entire time has been done deliberately to destroy this economy, and there's been plenty of indicators that things are on a runaway train. So for years, people have been incrementally moving away from the dollar. And with this new AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, you're seeing major U.S. allies in the last week alone going and joining this new bank. Now, this has caught a lot of people by surprise. Austria's joined, South Korea's joined, or Austria, rather, may be joining soon. But France, Italy, I believe Germany, and many other countries, they're all on board this AIIB. And so when the dollar crash comes, and it had a rebound recently as it was lined up with the euro 1-1, this last week things have taken a different turn, and the stock market has been fluctuating quite a bit more. And there's more headlines saying that investors are fleeing the stock market at the biggest rate since we've seen in 2009. And that was just as the banker bailout fiasco was beginning. And there are also people that are talking about a 7-year cycle of recessions and depressions. And 2008, we're looking at 7 years ago. And so there's a lot of focus on September of 2015. Also in the news, federal taxes are at an all-time high. So this debt that we've accrued hasn't been done for the benefit of the United States or the benefit of its people. It's not just about the United States. There's a report in the UK saying that due to lack of funding, college may become a thing of the past by 2020, as we see our society being socially engineered to where more people are working for the sex industry or working for the military-industrial complex, becoming a police officer or working for the state. We're at a time now that much of society that's asleep is more dependent than ever on the state, and they're willing to fight to the death to protect it and protect what the state gives them, because we are a dependent society. And really, the worst is yet to come. One could say that these are the good times. So everything is building up to this larger crescendo. However, I'm not of the belief that the major aspects of this Third World War are going to be kicking in the next couple of years. It takes time to build up for what they're actually building. And so when you have the United States going on the borders of other countries and arming rebels and doing all of these things and overthrowing countries and threatening countries and backing coups, and there's a lot of information about Western intelligence running ISIS. So that's some pretty dark stuff when you're living in that type of society where those things are actually being orchestrated around you as society is continuing to be socially engineered, especially in cities like Portland, Oregon. Especially in cities like Portland, Oregon. A false, fake utopia with a dark underbelly. And so much of our society is focused on physical pleasure and fleeting moments of happiness, when in reality the creep just keeps on creeping in. If you get a society so selfish and concerned about themselves, how are they going to care about the next generation when number one is themselves and knowing themselves? Unfortunately, you don't move ahead spiritually, economically, or any other way when you're only focused on yourself. So that's really why they've done what they've done, why they've divided the genders, and they're attempting to divide the perception of races. And we are different to a certain degree, and we should appreciate the differences, but we're now in a society where there's a lot of different psyops taking place within our population. It's the manufactured Civil War paradigm that we're seeing. Meanwhile, there is a massive martial law drill that's taking place in multiple states, so we're seeing an uptick in drills, just like we saw several years ago as the government prepares for some sort of massive unrest. And Texas has been labeled as a hostile state in their scenarios. And the federal government recently raided a sovereign meeting or group based in Texas. A lot of focus on Texas over the years. Also look at where Texas is on the map of the United States and its proximity to Mexico. Back to Mexico. Mexico, Canada, the West Coast, I do not consider these places to be safe places down the line, nor the East Coast. There's more than a few reasons why university students at the University of Cornell in their recent study said during a zombie apocalypse, survivors should head west. But they weren't talking about Portland, Oregon. They weren't talking about San Francisco. They weren't talking about Los Angeles. They weren't talking about Seattle. They were talking about the Rocky Mountains. They were talking about places where you're getting away from people, also echoing my own information and some of the things talked about on this YouTube channel the last 6 to 7 years. So it's all being designed for people to believe that the United States has to come down. And it's wrong what's taking place. To speak against the anti-Americanism is not to speak for the evils taking place or the military-industrial complex. My show started with trying to bring light to the other truths relating to 9/11 and why our country got involved in all these wars. But it's all been a suicide mission. You just can't go overthrowing country after country, engaging in psychological warfare, funding rebels that do the most horrendous things, in particular rape, murder, beheadings, things of that nature. And some of the beheading videos have been proven to be fake. But when you have governments going out and engaging in that type of evil, I believe there's karmic consequences, absolutely. But it's important for people to understand that are Americans that say, hey, I didn't do this. This doesn't involve me. Well, the way things work, unfortunately, and you can even look at the U.S. military, how they've treated innocent people in other countries. When countries are occupied, invaded, they take things out on the people because the people are viewed as responsible for letting their tyrants get out of control. Okay, this is how basically the United States looks at other people from other. Look at what they did to Afghanistan and Iraq. You think the people that were killed by the U.S. military had something to do with 9/11? No. So all these things come with karmic consequences, and China has a lot of darkness in its culture. All you have to do is look at the Falun Gong issue, and then you can find other issues sprouting out from there. But that is one of the things that I would say is one of the most important to understand, is that that is a nation involved in organ harvesting, that is enjoying closer economic ties to the United States. China, the nation that is buying up all different types of U.S. assets. What kind of assets? You have real estate, you have hotels, you have golf courses. That's the latest. You have large chunks of land. Several years ago, it was in the Idaho Statesman that China was attempting to buy a fairly large square mileage of property. And then, of course, people that were questioning this were called conspiracy theorists. And they actually came out with, you can Google it, a conspiracy theorist guide to the Chinese Idaho takeover. But all it did is just include hyperlink after hyperlink, fact, that yes, the governor, I believe his name is Mr. Otter, had been meeting with the Chinese and had brokered these deals. So when you get to Google and you type in China record numbers of land bought, acreages, you're going to come up with articles all across the United States. It's going to pop up like dots. Texas shares a close relationship with China, being that Rick Perry invited the Huawei Corporation to China, and they're set up in Plano, Texas. They've already been identified as a Chinese company engaged in spying on the U.S. military. And of course, it's all been set up by design for China to have the monopoly on the rare earth minerals, which are necessary for very special components, circuits, things of that nature, much of it made in China. Our computers, a lot of these computers have been made with a kill switch. So I want you to know and think about and research how long this dependency on China has been taking place, long before these so-called tensions, military tensions, geopolitical tensions. And so people can look at Henry Kissinger in 1973, opening the door with China, with Nixon at that time. And they can even go further in history and look at how the United States was funding Chiang Kai-shek, and then they put their money behind Mao Zedong. They and Britain and parts of Europe, you could even say Israel, the Zionists, they played an instrumental role in shaping China to be the China that it is today, and actually in influencing their government to the point that it was from the United Nations in New York City that the one-child policy was enacted. And so now you have an imbalance in China, not enough wives for the men. You have a resource depletion, you have soil depletion, you have natural climate change, which is more important to study than the perception of the man-made climate change. When you have changes in the Earth's magnetic field, changes in solar flares, you have droughts, you have other things. I'm not saying geoengineering is not involved. We have massive levels of climate change taking place on the planet that is affecting resource availability. And when you add in poor irrigation techniques to where Nestle's literally sucking the aquifer out of California, and NASA says California may only have 1 year left, you're going to deal with a mass migration of people to Portland, Oregon, which is going to cause unrest on its own level. So that's one example that I've talked about of a much larger macrocosm of the climate change refugee, or just those that are pushed from place to place for economic reasons. Homelessness, for example.